to Austin, I felt it took me a while to put my finger on it. But what I found in Austin, people just hang. People, they're real.
Yeah.
They're real.
Yeah.
Unlike what you were saying, I feel like in these other places, people are, it's a destination for people who want to come and perform.
Yeah.
I think maybe the early San Francisco people, it was different for them. But later, as prosperity starts to come in and success comes in, then you attract a different breed.
Yeah.
At first, there are the people who made it, who made this place be what it is. And then it attracts all the bling followers and the bling attracted people. And when those people show up, it's time for all of us to get out. And that's one of my worries about Austin too. And I guess I count myself in it, but you know, because we also new arrivees, always been curious now. But how are we going to protect this space?
Yeah, these you know, in the best possible version of the Austin history, this is the early days of Silicon Valley in Austin. So you get a chance to build on top of this culture that's already been here, of the weirdos, the artists, the sort of the characters, but also the general kindness and love that just permeates the whole place. Build on top of that entrepreneurial spirit, so like tech companies, new startups, all that kind of stuff, and then you get a chance to build totally new ideas, totally revolutionary ideas, and make them a reality. You dream big and build it here. I think Elon represents that with all the people that kind of try to do the cutting edge stuff they're doing at Tesla and SpaceX. But there's a bunch of other companies that are just like coming up. I get to talk to a bunch of tech people, and they're just incredible. Versus San Francisco, there's a cynicism a bit, and also some of the interaction with strangers. There's always a bit of a calculation, like how good is this going to be for my career?
How can hanging out with this person can advance me? You know, you go to a party, they're seizing up. It's like, I'm going to talk social because that's not going to advance me. Who's going to advance me next? And so this is what I would not want to see here in Austin. And I think maybe there's one way to try to. I really would like to see Austin not go the way San Francisco did. And I've been told before, like how you pronounce San Francisco with a French accent. San Francisco. It's great. I think that's the one word you call with a French accent. It sounds too long. That's San Francisco. It's San Francisco. So now that you find me cute, you're gonna have to forgive me when I mess up my English because English is not my first language. So I always try to make sure people know that. But you know this is why I am very interested in what some folks here are working on, and I'm just gonna be very selfish here because I want to help her with what she's doing. And someone like you know, Nicole Tech and her project, you know, with the housing project that they have right now, making sure that Austin remains a town that's affordable for people of all walks of life. If we can accomplish making sure that all walks of life, doesn't matter how little you're making money-wise, that you can stay in this town so the diversity and background can remain, then I think Austin stands a chance to really show the world how to do things differently. And what I love about you know, her initiative is just how they're really trying you know, to get work on keeping affordability down for most people. I think it's important to, because it seems like it matters to you, I know that it matters to me, I absolutely would not want to see Austin go away as San Francisco did. And I think the key to that is making sure that true diversity, not like the fluff crap diversity we're hearing over there. And that's another thing, by the way, because San Francisco likes to pride itself in, oh, you know, we are so into diversity. But I'm like, if diversity for you means gender, difference of gender, skin color, you know, maybe the different accents we have, and you think check, I'm like, it's not enough. Can we also add diversity of thoughts? And that's the other problem I have with that place, you know. And I know some folks who are scared of saying much around people. That's also another thing. So not only they're sizing you up, but everybody's also, there is this invisible, how should I say this? There's this invisible agreement that they all seem to have to stay on script.
Yeah, there's a feeling like you're following a certain kind of script that's very kind of shallow, and there is a bit of a categorization going on. Which category do you belong to? And let's put this into a simple math equation. What comes out as opposed to just the free, open, embrace people, the weirdos, the characters, the interesting, the full, deep sense of diversity.
Exactly.
Not just ideas, but backgrounds and rich and poor, like
Artists, engineers,
high school
name it.
dropouts, PhDs,
Yes.
all of this.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's what makes for a rich society that's going to get ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned Nicole's efforts and what she really is passionate about. I don't know how complicated that work is, because there's probably a big force trying to increase how much it costs to live in Austin. I don't know how you resist that. Whenever I go to New York City, just the fact that there's a giant park in the middle of it, I wonder, like, how did they pull this off? This is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like to resist the force of the increasing price of the land, and still to protect this idea of having a park. And then in the same way, protecting the ability for people from all walks of life to live in the center of the city, to live around the city, to chase a dream when they don't get any money in their pocket.
Absolutely.
I don't know how you do that. There's partly political, probably, regulation, all that kind of stuff.
A lot of it has to do with regulations. And this is where her and I also very much see eye to eye in terms of, the free markets and also prosperity building, because it's always the same problems most of the time, most places. Here what you have is some people, in the name of, we gotta stand for, and I don't like to use this word, but maybe you help me find a better one, but at least that's a word that people can understand. We gotta stand for the lesser fortunate among us. Some people would call them, maybe oftentimes use the word, maybe the underdogs, whatever it is. I will just say maybe the lesser fortunate among us, right? In the name of standing up for them, you're promoting policies that are actually going to backfire, and where they end up being the first ones to suffer from it. So let's take this whole housing issue that Nicole and her team are working on. We find that oftentimes the cost, at the end of the day, it's the good old supply and demand equation. If you're going to make it so hard that the supply level of housing remains below a certain threshold, remains lower than the demand of people who need, especially affordable housing altogether, what's going to happen is scarcity, prices go up, and who gets kicked out first? The lesser fortunate among us. And so, but I find that oftentimes people, in the name of we care, don't engage their mind. And a friend of mine said this, and he said it so well, he said, having a heart for the poor, that's easy. Having a mind for the poor, that's the challenge. And oftentimes, we all have a heart for the poor. But when it comes then what do we do to have a real impact on making sure that people get a chance at, going up, then that's where everything starts falling apart. And then you have people who, then they start pushing for policies, housing policies, making it super hard for you to even renovate or add one more story to your home or anything like that. By doing that, you're messing up with the supply of housing, and therefore the people who can't afford, people get priced out of the market. And so what people like Nicole are doing are going back to where all of this is taking place, and they're going back to the regulation side. And just like, I'm sure we'll talk about it here, but people wonder today, why is Africa the poorest region in the world? We go back to the same culprit. Bad laws. And tons of senseless regulations. If you make it so hard that in Berkeley, for someone to build one more story to their home, which means maybe one more unit that could be rented out to someone, and if many more people do that, then you have a much bigger supply, which means prices will go down, which means more people have access, among them, especially the lesser fortunate among us, then we're starting to see a winning proposal, aren't we? But instead, if you go the other way around, then all of a sudden you're pricing them out of the market. Same thing was done with us. So oftentimes when I see problems of this nature, you can betcha that regulations and senseless laws are the heart of it. And that's what they're tackling. It's not popular, it's not fun, and people tend to not even understand where you're coming from. But this is a problem we have with people not understanding Econ 101.
Well, so it's the regulation, the laws, and the system that props them up and increases the span of those laws. And we'll talk about that, the fascinating way those kinds of things develop, when it works, when it doesn't. Let me sort of step back and ask you a question about Africa. In the West, in many places in the world, Africa is almost talked about like it's one country, like it's one place. So, in what ways is Africa one community, and in what ways is it many, many, many communities, just from your perspective, from in Senegal and beyond?
Right. So, at the most basic of what makes us one goes back to even what makes you African. You are African. I'm African. We're one big family. Africa is very much, at the end of the day, the foundation and the birth of the human race. So, from that standpoint, at the most basic level, we're all Africans.
Where this whole thing started.
Exactly. Where this whole thing started, and how at some point humanity was hanging by its fingernails. Only 2,000 of us were left on this earth, and eventually we started. We went for survival, and that's how we started to spread around. And some going up north, some going this way, that way. And as you're traveling to different places, then features start to change to adapt to where you are. Right? So hair gets lighter for some people, eyes get different shape for others to adjust to our new natural habitat. The genomics program, I think, at the National Geographic did that so well for people who are interested in going back to that work with Spencer Wells and such. But so at the very basic, most basic level, that's what unites us all, first of all. And then I would say that the continent, especially here, I will group it into Black Africa. Black Africa. Unfortunately, are common stories, of having gone through this terrible, horrible period of around the same time the whole continent being, enslaved and colonized. So that, in a way, forms not that we were ever the first people or only people ever, enslaved in this world. As a matter of fact, the word slaves comes from esclave, slave, Slavs, les Slav, right, from the Eastern Bloc. So the first slaves were actually people looking more like you than looking like me, right?
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily remember all of that because in our human psyche, the closest to us in history of a big mass of people being enslaved is African people. We were the last group like that.
The pain of World War I and World War II permeates Europe, but it certainly does for the former Soviet Union, the countries that made up the former Soviet Union. Does in the same way the pain of slavery and empires using Africa, does that permeate the culture? Is there still echoes of that?
In a way, yes. Especially the fact that, in many different places, whether it's Ghana or my country or Benin, where you have these places that we call the door of no return, or the places of no return, which this was the last place where the slaves were standing, or, this is in Senegal, we call it the door of no return. There is this one door, you're there in the slave house, and once they go, they go. It's that's it. That's going to be the last time they see back home. So those, of course, it creates for a common lived experience, which becomes a common lived history, and of course it's going to tire us up.
Is there a resentment, because you mentioned hospitality?
Yeah.
Is there a kind of resentment of the foreigner that there's a rich, vibrant land, there's many resources, there's powerful cultures? Are they just going to show up and use us?
Yeah.
That's a way to see geopolitics in this modern world.
Yeah. This is okay. So where it plays very differently is, so if you came to Senegal today, there is not really a problem at that level. Where people's resentment start to come from is, of course, when bad behavior shows up, meaning like you have so many white people who can show up, and just in their attitude, they have an entitlement attitude, right? And they think that in a way we're all still servants. Some people in your face, some people more, but that can cause some little resentment. But where really the resentment is,
and that can, at the entitlement, can take different forms, like even pity.
Yes. Don't even get me going on that. I was trying to be polite today, so just Don't. Let's do not.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I tell myself, my God, today you're going to be all composed. Let's be all composed. So don't go there and make a fool of yourself.
Yeah.
Just behave.
Yeah.
But
Hold
if
it together.
you get me on some grounds, that's when it's all gonna go to hell.
Let's move beyond that to resentment. There's a dance between hospitality and resentment.
So when you come in, you're you live your life, you're just a normal human being, and you treat me decently like you would treat a friend, normal people. I have no problem with you. I'm not gonna come back and be like, well, you and your ancestors have enslaved me. You're not gonna see that stuff. Sometimes I'm in this country where I feel like that's, might look like that. But we in Africa don't do that. Now, if you come, you have this nasty attitude, you think you're still seeing servants around, well, you're gonna have a problem. Someone like me, I might even grab you by the back of your neck and, take you back to the airport. That's when you're lucky.
Right. You very quickly.
Exactly. But where things come up is, especially nowadays with the African youth, when we have to be reminded of the World Bank, when we have to be reminded of even the world, places like we want to compete for, like all of these places that seem to constitute, the way they describe them, and I say they, it's primarily my Pan-African friends. So here maybe terms are worth describing. So the Pan-African movement goes way back when. We're talking about, way back when, started in the 30s, going on all the way from there. So what you have there is people who have started coming together and dreaming up an emancipated Africa, away from the colonies, because at that point there were still colonies, and dreaming up all of that. So we're talking about people like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, we're talking about Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, talking about Blaise Diagne of Senegal, and other people like that, Gandhi of Malawi. So anyway, and the African youth of today, we're still hanging onto some of these ideas of, and on some of these dreams of a reunited Africa. So when you were talking about what seems to unite you, there is that, also, meaning like we all feel like we're part of the same family. Is it only in our heads? Is it a reality? For many different reasons, there is definitely what we call a Pan-African movement. And I very much myself consider myself one of them. I don't agree all the time with where we want to go and how we want to go there, but not where we want to go. Where we want to go is we would love to see a united Africa, for sure. But how to get that accomplished, that's where oftentimes we have issues. So on something like that, so this Pan-African, especially the Pan-African youth, but it's beyond the Pan-African youth, it's the youth in general in Africa, World Bank, UN, all of these organizations that they tend to qualify as imperialist organizations. And it's not always a good way to describe them, but I think the sentiment. And from that place, there is tons of resentment. Because for the longest time, these groups, organizations, and some that preceded them have proceeded to actually decide what even our new frontiers would be. You see, when you go to a place like Senegal, Mali, all of that, different countries, we're one people. One kingdom, and then at some point they decided, just when you look at Africa, have you looked at how straight some of these borders are? We're like, did the robots follow these? Really? No offense to robots, especially in this one. But you know what I mean? So they have continued deciding what it would be to be us, to live on our land, and how do we even progress. And it just keeps going. They get to decide how are we gonna, which type of even economic development path are we gonna choose or not. So it's very so from my standpoint, yes, there's a lot of resentment, including even from people like me.
Have actually created a fortune in unity. I've seen that in Ukraine, in the invasion of Ukraine, where it's a pretty divided, not pretty, a very divided country with many factions. The invasion really forced everyone to think about the identity of this nation. sense, Africa as one place, as one continent, had to find multiple times its identity, the resistance of the oppressor.
Especially Sub-Saharan Africa. Especially Sub-Saharan Africa. Yes.
And there's an interesting aspect to this because the president is also the head of the African Union. So we'll talk about the fascinating geopolitics of that whole situation. But let me ask, in general, you talk about this question, this fascinating question: what does it take for a country to prosper? What does it take for a country to prosper? You see many countries in the world that really struggle and many that flourish. And it's not always obvious why, because some have natural resources, some don't. Some have wars, some don't. Some have
sort of rule of law. You can put the economic freedom is at all the levels, that which will allow entrepreneurs and business people to create value entrepreneurial. We're not talking about racism or anything like that. It's like you found a pie to be this big and you make it this big. So that's what we're talking about. Create value. Yes. So when it comes to that, we have found that whether you're looking at two countries that started the same, we're talking the same people, East Germany, West Germany, South Korea, North Korea. Very similar people to start with, right? But yet, radical outcomes. I know that today Germany is united, but we're talking about back in the days when you had East and West. Same people, very different outcomes. Like I said, South Korea, North Korea, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, very different nations. Dubai compared to Singapore or to England. Very different yet the same outcome. So it seems to me that whenever we're looking at prosperity, if a nation is prosperous, regardless of whatever other shenanigans they might be running, whatever other operating software they might be running for anything that's not related to business, if on the business side they are proponents of a free markets, or at least a base level of free markets, we know that such countries will create prosperity.
So what are the aspects of the operating systems that lead to Singapore and to South Korea and all that kind of stuff? So can you speak to different elements that enable the toolkit for entrepreneurs?
Sure. And maybe here, let me just maybe illustrate it with my own story, and then I can take you back to...
Maka, tell us your story.
No.
Who are you?
It's just because it started with me coming here. You shouldn't be a robot and everything, and now it looks like we've known you sorry for 12 months. And then you're like, tell people. No, but so this is where this question, even when you ask me how are how do some countries become prosperous? That question, Lex, I had it when I was 7 or so. That's when my family moved me to from Senegal. For the first time of my life, I left my country, I left my continent, and I was headed to Europe to go join my people, my family, my parents, who were there as economic migrants. My parents had migrated for a better life, as so many people have to. Coming from poorer places, coming from low-income countries.
You saw the difference
Yes.
between the two places?
How else would you call it? Here you were in Senegal, minding your own business, causing tons of trouble everywhere. You know, just being a happy, free ranch kid that I was.
Yeah. So you were always a troublemaker, not just now. Okay.
Life would be fun without it.
Of course, I agree.
Right? So, because even you like, if you're like all put together, like front, I know there's a lot of troublemaking behind you.
Just really trying to keep it together.
I know you are, but with me, I'm gonna totally bring it out. So, just, yeah. So,
You saw the difference.
right, I saw it different. I'm walking in here, back home, and I tell people this story because, to me, it's a defining story. Back home, to take a shower, it takes time. Grandma has to, make the charcoal catch on a little stove that you use at, when you go camping. And then she puts a pot of water on it. It boils. She takes it, puts it in a bigger in the middle of the winter, and my mom was like, "My dad, time for your shower." I'm like, I'm not getting naked. Where's the bottle? Just where's the bucket of hot water? She's like, "Oh, you silly! Come on, just jump in." And I jump in the shower, turn the buttons, the water's coming down temperature. I'm not playing with. She's like, "Are you kidding me?
So amazing.
I've been cheated out of life, my whole life." So that's what happened. And then I'm like, oh, and all of these roads, the paved roads, unlike back home, everything is like sand. And my feet are always I always have to wash off when I go back home, and your shoes get ruined most of the time. And it started, and I had this question, and it was just like, wow, how come they have this and we don't? So I was not being like, oh, how come they have all of this money? Oh, I was not that. It was just like, how come? And I think what I was alluding to was, how come life is so easy here? And it's not.
And easy, not in a negative sense.
No.
In a beautiful sense. Sometimes I get, just having traveled through the war zone, just to come back, traveling through Europe, back to America, I'll just get emotional just looking at the efficiency of things, like how easy it is, how we can, first of all, in Ukraine, you currently can't fly, right? It's a war zone. Just even the thing of transportation, you said roads. Yeah, the quality of roads in the United States is amazing. Just not, many of the places that to drive in Ukraine, you're talking about, really bad conditions of roads. And I'm sure in many parts of Africa and many parts of the world, the roads are even worse.
Right.
And outdoor, having an indoor toilet is a fascinatingly awesome luxury to have.
It is. And don't take me wrong, Lex. Do we have some great roads now in many parts of Africa? Yes. Main arteries, great roads. You're like, whoa, this is moving. Yes, we do. But definitely more today than in my time growing up. Do we have, a country like Nigeria that just birthed 6 unicorns last year alone? Yes. Do we have the African youth out there being so amazing and, living their lives? Yes. We have all of that. But it is still, unfortunately, just like we're scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And those people still are getting all of that accomplished, literally swimming through molasses. This is some of the most gross, immoral, unfair waste of human capital.
And so that started with you as a 7-year-old asking, wait a minute, how do amazing people in Europe do this and the amazing people in Africa don't?
Yeah. And that's a key word, amazing, because that's what I realized later, and it was not always like that for me, amazing, right? I knew instinctively that, of course, we are amazing too. But so eventually the question became, so I went from, how come they have this and we don't, to the country as I'm growing up and researching, because it stayed with me. When I tell you I'm obsessed, I'm haunted. I am haunted. So, you can laugh all you want, but it's... So, the question became, how come some countries like the United States, Singapore, are rich, and some others, like mine, and many others in Africa, are poor? That became the question. And along the line, along the road, I continued on living my life, wondering about this question. And I've heard all types of reasons as to supposedly why that might be the case. Some people with a very straight face are still peddling the IQ theory, according to which, come on darling, it's not your fault. Your skin color goes with a gene sequence that just doesn't allow you to be as smart as white people are. And it's not your fault, but just accept it. That stuff is still out there. It's very real. And I have to hear it. And others would say to me, oh, it's just because, you guys don't have an adequate level of education. And I say, maybe you gotta go say that to most of the street sellers you go see in Senegal. You go up to many of these street sellers in Senegal. They are wading through cars, in moving cars, under the hot sun, fumes thrown at their face, trying to sell you anything and that you think you might be able to use. Whether we're talking about an ironing board, to an umbrella, to Q-tips, to toothpicks, selling you whatever you need from your car. These are street sellers, and you ask them, dear, do you have any degree? Yeah, I have this degree in math or in literature or whatever. Some very, very educated people. Yet they're right there. This is what they're doing.
So that's just that scale, wasted human potential. So that has to do, the wasted human potential has to do now with the system, with something about the laws, something about sort of the things that limit or enable the entrepreneur.
Yes, because at that point I've heard this. I heard people saying, "Yeah, your IQ is no good. Yeah, you don't have enough degrees, or you're not educated." No, some people would even say it's because you guys are malnourished. Malnourished. You need to be fed. Others, oh well, maybe I give you some shoes and maybe something's gonna change, whatever. And then, so I heard all of this nonsense, like, but guess what? None of it makes sense. You know why it didn't make sense? Because if any of that crap was true, why is it that my parents or any other people from these places, and by the way, some people call those places God-forsaken land. That's also a type of incorrect you always have to hear. When it's not just flat out SHIT, whole countries from, one person a few years ago, president of this country.
That sentiment is sometimes there.
It is. It is. As I go on with my life, trying to find the answer to why are some countries like mine poor while others are rich, I'm hearing all of these reasons thrown at me. And then they make no sense. Because then how come then, if my parents move, as it is usually anyone else moves from a poorer nation to a nation that supposedly is rich, all of a sudden they get to manifest the greatest potential. So I'm starting to think this has nothing to do with a person per se, because we're talking about the same person, same background, same name, features, everything. So I'm starting to think maybe it doesn't have to do with a person. Maybe we're talking about something that has to do with the place that they came from, or the place that they're going to. So this little thing is starting to be in my mind. Again, remember, this is not something that I woke up to overnight. I'm like, voila, I got my question. It took me for a long time, and I had to face off, to have many different ideologies face each other. I had to really have a reckoning literally in my heart and in my mind. And so then, that's what I'm thinking. It cannot be, no, it's the same people. It has to be about the place. But then what about this place? But then, even about the place, you're thinking, again, two countries, different backgrounds, same outcome, same background, different outcome. What is this? And then I go on. I am in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, early 2000s. Okay, dot-com boom, all of that. And I'm starting to discover this concept of this thing called entrepreneurship. I'm in Silicon Valley, and just getting to experience what seems so cliche by now, but people getting together in the back of a napkin, talking about an idea, bring it out, and then they go out and they talk to some investors who's going to invest in it. Then they have the lawyers who get to, put all of this stuff together, and then they have the big four CPA firms. This whole ecosystem of what they call of entrepreneurship, and then eventually this concept of entrepreneurship being this idea of creating something out of nothing. So there I am, and at some point I become an entrepreneur myself. And the way I became an entrepreneur was not like I woke up and I'm like, I want to make money, so I'm going to become an entrepreneur. No. And this is also another problem I have with people who have a problem with entrepreneurs or business people. Most entrepreneurs do not start a business to become rich. Most entrepreneurs start a business because they have identified a problem that bothered them enough that they said, enough is enough, I'm going to do something about it. What entrepreneurs are people who criticize by creating. Do they always get it right? No. As a matter of fact, the failure in entrepreneurship is humongous. It's kamikaze. husband passed away as soon as I was about to sign my first term sheet, and yet I had to keep going. What force can keep you going after you just lost the love of your life? What force keeps you going? The force of, oh, I just want to be rich? Really? When your whole world is upside down? Your whole world is upside down, and you just want to quit? You just want to go meet him and join him in death? I stayed. Why? Because of the same reason why I started my company. I stayed because the women whom I had put back to work by then, if we're talking about some of the most vulnerable women in my country, these are women who grow the hibiscus, which we need to make the